Welcome to Ed Talks. My name is Dr. David Slomp. I am the Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge, and with me is Dr. H.J. Wieden, who is the Alberta Innovates Strategic Research Chair in Bioengineering. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, David.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. Maybe we'll begin by just talking about your area of research. What is the area of research that you work in?
In broad strokes, we're talking about bioengineering, and whatever bioengineering means. We are basically looking at the underlying design principles of the molecular makeup of every living systems and trying to understand the makeup and rationally design new functionalities. And you might ask the question, what's that good for and who cares, right? I think everybody should care about that, but I mean, most of the applications that the work that we're doing are related to our antibiotics research or like biofuel production, precision agriculture, and there are a lot of applications there where we're now trying to get things organized and designed on the molecular level rather than on the organism level or on a higher level. So I think that's what we're doing.
And what's the advantage of working at the molecular level?
What's the advantage at the molecular level? But everything we see on the larger scale is basically brought about by the interaction of the molecules, right? So by that, directly engineering them or working on that root level will allow us to more precisely get to the functionalities that we want.
Right. Can you give maybe like a concrete example of a specific kind of engineering project you've done?
So we have been engaged by the local fire department here, like the Lethbridge Fire Department, because they had issues with making decisions about how well their cleaning procedures actually are, and making a decision to decide between one cleaning procedure and the other one, which is the better one, because there was no way for them to test which one was better. The approach that we used is basically using the technology that we have in the lab to determine which organisms exist in their vehicle on the molecular level, like to identify who's there. And so that is a direct application of what we're developing, right?
Right. The idea is to develop some sort of a way of testing
a rapid
if those things are still
test,
there.
right? Yes. So that the actual people in the emergency services can do this without using a lab or having a long delay time until they know if their vehicle has been cleaned or not.
Yeah, that's a huge.
It's a direct application of technology we develop. Right?
Yeah, fascinating. So what got you into this area of research?
Star Trek.
Yeah.
I have to say that actually, and the realization that I would never going to make it into space. So I decided, it's kind of cool to discover things that are in my reach. Yeah. And probably the fact that my dad is a car engineer, so I had a whole thing of building things from pieces, testing them, and you have your idea and have design features integrated in that. I think I like that. Yeah. Going into submarines and going to deep ocean vents, that was not my thing to do with my feeling for claustrophobia. I'm also afraid of heights, so flying is out, so a lab was the thing to do, right? And it had a little bit of that thing of magic to it, because you could do transformations that you cannot see. And that got me excited. So I went to school, did chemistry. Yeah. So I actually do have a degree in chemistry. Yeah. While I was doing that, I realized that what we were doing with value systems, that because we're empowering people doing stuff, I thought it was important to also get some ethics around that. Right, So I also took a partial degree in philosophy at the same time. Okay. Then I realized that the chemistry is an interesting way of looking at it because we're looking at at atomic level and how transformation on that molecular level works, and the connection to biomolecular machines to the next complexity level was very evident. So I did a degree in biochemistry. So I did my PhD in molecular biology, and then a postdoc in physical biochemistry, learning, basically building the skill set and the technologies to study biomolecules as machines and to forward and reverse engineer them. Yeah. How did I get there? Yeah, that's the thing. I was intrigued by the fact that you can have machines that are programmed. Yeah. So one of the interesting features that I like is, for instance, one of the machines that I'm right now studying is the ribosome. Right. And the ribosome, the study of the structure and function of the ribosome, got a Nobel Prize about a couple of years ago. And the reason why I study that, because it works like a tape recorder or an assembly machine, okay? So there's a message that runs through it, the machine reads it and decodes it and puts something else out of it. It actually has components, you can see the gears move, it's fantastic. And I got engaged in a research project that looks at the visualization of that process. And the people that developed that technology, and was one of my co-authors as well, got a Nobel Prize this year for the structure, for the technology that allows that. So, you know, this is like, it's exciting, okay? That's the thing, that's the way we're getting there. But why would people study the ribosome? The people study the ribosome because about 50% of the antibiotics that we're currently using, they target in one way or the other the dynamics and conformational, the motility of ribosomes in one way or the other, right? And so it's an important target, and we do not understand completely how they work. So I was intrigued in how do you break that tape recorder, basically, right? And the motivation stems from the fact that I got a serious infection one day, and I almost, you know, that went into sepsis, and without antibiotics I would be dead, right? You know, and giving the rise in antibiotic resistance that currently is the issue, I think we're doing something that is really at the forefront, and we're addressing it from the fundamental level. So allowing probably us to giving a better design framework for future antibiotics. So that's a long answer to your short question, but there's a story to this, I guess. And I get to do things and see things that no man or no one has seen before, right? But I cannot do that Uhura singing, so I'm not going to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I got to see your labs, and I know you've got a large team working with you in that. How did you get to that point in your career where you've got such a large team working with you? How do you manage that?
I don't have no answer for that second part of that question. I just, you learn as you go. I'm interested in, based on the answer that I gave you earlier, I'm interested in a lot of different things, and they're kind of interconnected, because I mean, when you're talking about how the ribosome works and that process of movement and decoding and being targeted by antibiotic resistances and working with the fire department on, you know, cleanliness or, like, you know, infection prevention in the emergency services, they are connected, right? I think I like to answer questions than rather be stuck on a technology, and that might be wrong. I don't know, but that's the way I feel good. It makes me wake up in the morning, so to do something new, right? And that way you branch out in different areas. You provide the technology. For instance, one of the components that we have is whatever I was describing about dynamics and functional relevance of molecular machines doing certain things. My dad works in the car engineering kind of thing, so I'm used to that design, build, test, fail, learn cycle, right? So in the lab, we basically have that. So when we're forward engineering or backward engineering something, we have the whole thing of, like, we can build it, we can simulate it, like car companies would simulate their car, and, you know, you would do it the same thing. I mean, if you're trying to shop a house right now, you have a simulation of the house on your app before you go and even go there, right? So that's what we're doing as well. So you have certain units in the R&D or in the research activities that we do that allow us certain flexibility. So we could actually respond to that request from the emergency, so from the fire department, because we had people that were working on it and they were interested enough to do that. But it also creates a very integrated multi or transdisciplinary research environment, right? So you need to have a certain critical mass to achieve that. I think we are there, and things come out of this that are, I mean, we have computational people working in the lab and vice versa. You don't always have that, and I enjoy that. I really enjoy that kind of, and the cycle works. I mean, we have done a couple of projects where you can clearly go. I mean, just Dylan is one of my most seasoned PhD student. He went through the whole thing from idea to design to simulate it to building it and then assessing it. And so that's good.
If you're following the questions, it must take you in lots of different directions. And does it feel like you don't have control of the research program necessarily? You kind of follow where it takes you? Or?
Well, that's an intended thing, right? I mean, I think you have to create a little bit of chaos. I should not know that word, but maybe let's say we have to create a little bit of chaos to create creativity, right? And I'm not very good if people force me to do and narrow me in certain things, right? And I have a lot of students in my lab that have the same thing. If you because you're coming over a problem and then you're stuck, and then you don't liking what you're doing anymore, right? And if you have no flexibility, then you cannot go around that. It is difficult because you have to rein in certain things. You can go off different in different ways, but I was saying they're all interconnected. It's not like they're like random pieces, right? It's just it grows naturally, and they're all held together by the overall arcing theme of that.
Right.
That design, build, test cycle, and basically understanding what the design principles of biological machines are, like molecular machines are. Yeah. I mean, what I enjoy is that we're not doing this in vacuum, right? We are not doing this like I do that in simulation and I don't know what it's good for. We're trying to do this in an applied angle from time to time, and that actually, and that forces you to branch out and do something different. But I mean, you still have to keep an eye on that you learn that, and you usually do.
When you're working with grad students, when you're developing, I mean, to thrive in your lab or to thrive in the environment that you're working in, what are some of the skill sets or the dispositions or the abilities that you need to have developed in order to be able to be successful? And what do you try to cultivate in your grad students, your students in that respect?
I guess from what I've said about like the environment where you have to be creative and a little bit that kind of chaos thing. I think the two main things that I'm trying to do is enable the students to discover their own creativity and start asking questions. And we talked about this earlier, that is one of the major features that I think is super important, because it's the second degree of learning, and actually it's a lifelong skill. Right. Because you have to ask questions about why this is happening and whatnot, right? So learning how, and I mean, when you talk to your own kids, for instance, it's often you see how they struggle in identifying the question to ask, because it's often easier to just accept things are the way they are, right? I think that is a super important question, and that determines your success, the ability to learn how to ask questions. And that's something, you can do this in my lab, you can do it in somebody else's lab, you can do it at home afterwards, right? Or you can even ask the technician at your car dealership, why is that expensive, right? I don't know. But that's one of them. The other one is, of course, team playing. When I went into the sciences, I thought I would be a solitary act. Like, I'm going to be the crazy scientist, the mad scientist. Because when you look at that, but even Pinky and the Brain there too, all right? But they are, so it's a team endeavor, right? At least in the life sciences where I'm coming, where my background is, it's a clear team endeavor, right? Because the piece the piece of question that you're asking is usually too big to be answered by one person. Either in time or in complexity and the technologies. And as I pointed out, the whole cycle, we have people that do computational work and they do lab work and they do both, but I mean, you have to have different techniques, and within the time frame, you need to be able to talk to the guy that has a technique that you don't have. Because if you're question driven, let's say, how do we solve this, which is basically an engineering approach, right? How do you solve this? You need to talk to people that have a technology understanding of, and is that something we should be using for this or not? So it goes with the question asking, right? The critical thinking, and it goes with the team and learning how to ask that question, right? But also of, what is the culture of criticizing your idea, right? Or like self-criticism of that idea, or being okay with somebody telling you, well, I'm not sure if that's going to lead you where you're going to go. And I think that is the key to the success of the size of the group. Right. Because I mean, I cannot speak to every person every day for half an hour. I can't, right? So there has to be some internal conversation. I think that is the strengths that you learn in that environment. And
and I guess a tolerance for not knowing and not being able to control the outcomes yourself, I guess, must be part of what. I look at my own students who come into the ed faculty, and they're very, and I find a lot of our top students are very much type A students. They like to know the outcome. They like to work to the outcome and that. And then they come into a classroom or they come into a lab environment and they realize there's a lot of things here I can't control. And I have to learn how to be okay with that and how to function within that space.
Yeah, but within the team, you, for instance, have the chances of like at least mitigating that problem, right? A couple of things, just work on timelines that you cannot control, right? But you have your life around this, in order to make this happen, you have to team up with people, right? And that's normal, right? But letting go, I mean, but that's related to, asking a question is the same thing, because you admit that you don't know, right? For instance, or, that letting go of
shifting over to the teaching side of the work that you do. What are some of the courses that you teach? And again, in terms of just developing students, what are some of the things you're hoping to achieve in those courses?
So I think research is teaching as well.
Okay,
I just make
absolutely.
that point here. I've been the courses that I'm engaged in, or that I've been teaching the most recent is a methods course in biochemistry. So I teach in biochemistry. I'm in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and as part of my teaching assignment, I teach a methods course, contemporary methods in biochemistry, which adds onto the standard techniques that you're using in a discipline, and that kind of features and highlights techniques that we have in the research labs. So it's a 4,000 level course. Right. And I teach Biochemistry 3300, which is bioenergetics and metabolism, and deals basically with the molecular transformations that occur within the cellular framework. So basically the biochemical wires that run your cells or your organism, right? And I pointed that out. It's probably the most hated class in biochemistry because it is very content heavy. I really enjoy this class. I have to say that. Because yes, it's content heavy, but the cool thing about that, it's like learning a language, you know? When you first look at it, there's so many different words and they're so different and I don't know, right? But once you get around it, like there are rules, like, you know, there are only certain things can happen in certain conjunctions, right? Or there are connectivities there, right? And I think metabolism is a fantastic way of demonstrating that, and you know, basically using the huge complexity of life and demonstrate how that there are actually design principles behind that. So actually to reduce that complexity. Right. Oh yeah, yes, you can tell. I'm excited about this.
When you teach that course, obviously the content knowledge is important. Students need to learn that. What are the other things that you're trying to cultivate in your students in that?
Yeah, so one of the things is, of course, it's one of the, for a biochemistry major, that is the first time they're applying, for instance, I shouldn't say the first time, but it's because it's integrating knowledge from the chemistry end of things, so they apply knowledge they have learned in a chemistry class, like organic chemistry, suddenly on their subject matter, which it's kind of cool for them to do, to integrate that. It's initially a little bit scary because you have to do this, but afterwards it makes sense. Because you can then apply what you have done before. It's a second round of learning the same thing. Right. But the thing that I would say is one of the major things that I try to instill there is the question asking things. So asking the question, you know, because I mean, I show you the textbook and you look at that and you say, do I really have to learn all of that? That's a good question, right? Whereas the question is that going to be on the exams? Not a good question. A different question.
I'm with you.
So, so do I really need to learn all of that? And I always say, kinda, but not. I mean, the idea here is to find your path through it, right? And that goes with question asking, you know, in terms of addressing why is this happening? Why is this conversion happening the way it's happening? And I think open it. And I think being able and learn to ask and clarify the subject matter is an important feature that I would like to instill in a student to coming out of here, because as I said, this is a lifelong learning skill, and it makes your life easier when you're actually learning materials, right? But I was shocked when I came here, like we talked about it. Like when I came here, what's that? 14 years? 15, 13 years, something. 13 years ago. Okay, long time ago. The environment I came from is a very, very question oriented, and I have to admit I'm probably a little bit spoiled from where I did my PhD and my postdoc, because that was in a university setting where there was direct engagement in research. So the students, so it's a life sciences degree. The students come into the university and basically on day one they're in the research lab, because there's a direct connection between the subject matter they're studying and the application in the research lab. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to come to the University of Lethbridge, is because we do have the ability to provide that. And I mean, the independent study tool, for instance, you know, we are engaging with high school students, we're engaging with, I think this is super important with the learning process. So, and those students would never write exams. They only had one exam, that was the government exam to get the diploma, okay? Within the whole education degree, within the whole degree, they would run on peer evaluation on the subject matter, and amazing environment, okay? And I think, so I'm coming from that culture. So when you go into the classroom, and I came into the classroom here in 2005 and asked the question, so what do you guys know about cryo-electron microscopy? Silence fell, all right? So, and I was, okay. And I learned that is challenging. And so I try in every class that I teach to foster active engagement in the class. Like, the students should be asking that question, are not afraid, or asking themselves. I introduce problem solving here, but it is an issue in breaking the barrier. Because I mean, even in the class, I mean, people from different streams, they don't know each other. And I don't blame him for not, maybe the other guy is gonna think stupid of me and these kind of things. So it makes for an awkward class dynamic from time to time. And so I try to create a good class environment that enables this exchange of thoughts, because I mean, the benefit of the topic that I'm teaching is it's still evolving. This, the stuff still changes, all right? And so from time to time, a student asks the question, I think, I don't know that. How cool is that? And I can go back and figure it out. Or like, my favorite question is, okay, what do you think it would be, right? And then we can go from there. And in the end, we find out if that was true or not. And I think that is the, I like that conversation kind of thing, rather than the, I'll deliver the information. Because I mean, for $120 you get the textbook, right? You don't need me in that room. You need me in that room to talk to you about this, right? And so I like that.
So what are some of the things that you do first to kind of build that kind of environment where people feel comfortable talking, and obviously being open to the fact that maybe they don't know a lot of the answers to the questions that you're asking as a starting point? How do you break that down? Yeah,
that's a challenge, and that is interesting. It's a challenge that occurs. It's every group is different. And I don't know. So there are good years when I really have a good idea to break it, and there are years that are not very successful. So you have to live with that and go back and understand what you're doing. What you did wrong, actually. So often what I do, I mean, there are classical tools that you can use, right? For instance, an intro assessment, right? I mean, as I pointed out, one of the things, I don't know who's in my room, right? So I often ask questions, like I give a survey, like give a piece of paper and ask 3 questions, let's say. I think most of us do that in some sort or the other, right? Because I need to learn as well who's there, like what's their degree, blah, 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 and those answers they're okay with. And then we do polls about who likes cats and who likes dogs, okay? I am not a dog person, but I am a chocolate person, okay? So these kind of things. So, and that already gives a lot of discussion about the benefits of dogs and cats. But the other thing that I do, and I really enjoy, and it helps me, because I work with my hands, okay? And I like to hold on cups and drink. Is that we teach in a classroom. I like a classroom that is it's a little bit under, like it's small sized for the group of people that we have, but that classroom has flexible seating. It's a square room, and you cannot be away from me, or I cannot be away from you, and it has a sink. Okay, and why is that sink important? Well, I think the sink is important because I can bring my kettle, and we boil water, and we have tea together. Okay, and then you can start talking about the tea, and you can start about how the tea works in your metabolism. That kind of but I mean, it is a ritual. Okay, basically, the class starts with a ritual, and I think it helps students to get settled in that situation, but it also helps me because I then can get into the feeling, or into the space of that class, right? And it allows me to get into this, and that has been working very well. Another feature that we have been trying, and that's often an issue with the material, is that when you're memorizing pathways, there's often difficult to ask the question, when you ask, why is this? It's hard because that's the way it is, right? Why would you ask the question, how is this, right? And talking about that in a different framework might often help to get through that question. What I've tried the last 2 years is basically develop a game, or get the students into their, I mean, they're playing games, they're playing Magic or whatever they're playing, there are rule sets to this, and Magic is, I mean, Magic was my, the first thought that I had in that case, because you're gonna have tokens that you have to play, and certain things go on top of each other, some don't, right? And some are better than that, and those rules also occur in the metabolic system. You have to have ATP, you have to have energy, you have to you need RNAs to do certain functionality, you need proteins to do certain things. You know, if I throw my protein card on my ATP mana, then I suddenly can, you know, that's a conceptuality. And I asked them to start thinking about game-wise, like, you know, would you want a card game or a board game, you know, and how, for instance, I mean, a plot would be, what metabolism would I have to have if I would want to live on Mars? How would that affect what our chemical processes are, right? And well, there's mixed uptake to this. But well, we have done it the first year. In the first year, I realized that the first year is not good. So last year was pretty good. We gave the students certain course credit. We gave them some credit for participating in that, which is good because it is a basic participation mark. And some people are better in participation in like directly talking to me in that classroom, but some are not, right? But working on a game like that would allow them to participate in the classroom work without actually being too much out there, and you know, and so with both of them we got fantastic participation in this, and we teamed up with because I'm not a game developer apparently, we teamed up with Numedia, and basically they have a game development class, and so we were able to bring both classes together and have the Numedia students talk with the biochem students and vice versa, and explaining that problem and having the gameplay people talk to that, and the, you know, they need to know something about biochemistry. And I thought the best learning experience was for the biochemistry students to teach what they're just learning to somebody else. And so that was good. And I mean, some of it, because it's a third year class, you have some of those students you already had before, you kind of see how they are. And I had cases, particularly in that last class, where somebody that wasn't okay doing student suddenly went off because suddenly everything clicked, right? And that barrier of talking about the material and getting actually engaged was gone. Like, well, the barrier was gone. They were actually engaging with that, And good student. And that was a successful thing to do. But you know, I mean, you never know if it works, right? But I think the overarching theme is here the engagement again. And as you pointed out, you have to let a little bit of chaos happen in a positive way, right? Wrong answer again, right?
I find a lot of the work that I do with teachers to develop expertise, there's this fear of, if I go this route, will they follow me, right? If I don't have everything structured and I don't have it all laid out and I don't have the exam and I don't have the carrots and the sticks set in place, will they go with me? And I find that fear often is one of the biggest impediments to doing new things and to being innovative in a classroom and that. And do you think of moments in your teaching career where there was this sense of, like, maybe not fear so much as just this apprehension about, if I go there, what's going to happen?
That's constant. I don't know. It's a problem. I mean, but I mean, the problem is, I mean, you make decisions. I mean, you know, when you sit and decide and you're preparing yourself for your class, I have to agree. If you take if you deliver a class, always the same. That gives you the comfort of, I know it's going to happen. All right. But I am not good in instructing it when I'm doing it the same way, right? So when, for instance, the teaching center changed on me the room I was teaching in, right? From a normal classroom I was used to something with like different tables, they're moving around, and so I was challenged, and I have to admit, I kind of hated that, right? But again, it's cool, because then you suddenly know, we can do something different here, right? And I totally understand the fear, and of course we try to avoid that, right?
So how do you push through it?
The students push me through this. I mean, looking at you and say, you have two alternatives. So you're going to be, they're going to look at you and not engage with you. You're going to spend time with them and have no fun, or you're going to try to have fun with them. But I don't know. There's always, I mean, when I decided the game thing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it will take me probably like 5 iterations until I really find the best way of doing this, right? And the same is true when you're doing technology-based classes. How do you include certain technologies, right? How do you engage them? I mean, one of the one of the things that I really don't like is the necessity to evaluate people.
Right.
I mean, you have to evaluate, you have to grade them, but I mean, it takes a little bit of spontaneity out of these kind of things, and people are a lot afraid of that. And the whole mechanics of evaluating is a little bit of an impediment on the process. That's what I'm saying. You know, when you say, are they going to be following me, right? You know, yes, do they buy into this? And you know, if you have something they're going to buy into, is how I'm going to be able to evaluate them afterwards in that process, right? That's another challenge, right?
Yeah. My area of research is in assessment and the ethics of assessment, and how does assessment constrain or open up possibilities in a classroom. And unfortunately, so much of the assessment work we do has that negative kind of constraining effect.
It does.
So,
in particular, when you're doing something with a when it either has to do with the skill that you have to learn, or with a with creativity, because I mean, you know, there's no creativity does not work on the spot, right? You know, sometimes it occurs faster, sometimes it occurs later, and you know, how do you evaluate that, right? What I struggle with is evaluating when you learn a technique in the lab, for instance, right? It will take you a little bit to do this, right? You might fail on the first attempts, right? Is that good? Is that bad? And I think that failing is actually part of the learning process, right? And if you take that away, then I think it's going to be have negative impacts on the skill that you're actually learning, right? I mean, imagine you're learning how to play the piano, you're never allowed to make a mistake. That's going to be hard, right? Would you learn piano?
No.
Right? Or would you practice piano? That's the point, right? You know, you would do what the people would tell you, but would you, like, I wake up and say, well, I'm going to play this now, and maybe I'm going to let's try this, right? You wouldn't, right?
No.
And I try to, that's a challenge.
Yeah, you don't explore, right? You just do. What our viewers don't know is you're also a Distinguished Teaching Award winner in addition to being a distinguished researcher in that. And can you talk for a moment maybe about how your teaching and your research, and how that obviously focus on excellence in both of those areas kind of support each other?
For me, they're not separated. So that's why it's I probably you have seen that already or heard from the way I talk about these things. They're not disconnected, right? So there are two major driving forces that I have. One is learning to learning's sake, you know, discovering knowledge kind of thing. So that's a driving force, right? And the other point is the apprentice model. So you know, you have to learn by doing, basically following, and so I think they're engaging, and particularly in a discipline like ours, where you do have to do stuff on the lab, and it often has to do with, like, you know, you have to have the right skill set, like you know, actually manual, being able to do this kind of thing, right? So one of my favorite examples is I spent probably 1 year in my PhD to learn how to cast long gels, to sequence DNA, all right? That skill set is now $8 a pop, So you know, learning how to cast that gel was important at that point in time, but you know, being able to cast that gel might, you know, it's funny, but it's a handmade thing. It took me a while to actually do it, And so that's an apprentice thing. So why I'm saying that? Well, I'm saying it's because they're interconnected. So I think learning and teaching and doing the material that you're doing and the research is basically. So that's why I'm a big fan of out of classroom engagements and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but you probably will. So like whatever we're doing with and it's also related to the assessment thing and the applicabilities. We're doing having students participate in science-related competitions so that they, you know, again, it goes to the fact that people think that science is a solitary thing. But I mean, you know, having science run like a hockey team or like a baseball team, we're talking about that, or in my case, I guess a soccer or football team. It's a team endeavor, right? So I like to have the students go into this and practice that outside of the classroom and learn the skill sets there, right? And enabling to do that, I think that is super important, because then they come back basically into the classroom and understand what they're doing, and direct application of that is good. And I mean, you know, the language reference is not a bad thing. I mean, if you learn a language without practicing it, it's not going to be okay, right?
Yeah, so you've been involved with the iGEM program, had some great successes with that over the last few years as well. Could you maybe just describe what the iGEM program is and what it involves?
Yeah, so iGEM is iGEM is an acronym which stands for International Genetically Engineered Machines. It's a competition, and it is around synthetic biology and biological engineering. And the I forgot, probably 14 years old or something like that. Right. So we're doing this for 10 years now. It was sparked at the MIT in Boston at that point in time as a summer course. Right. Okay, so interesting, right? It's a summer course, and we're still running it as a summer course. Okay, but it was for engineering students. They were challenging the engineering students with the questions: can biological systems be engineered from standardized parts, like we would, software code or electronics and whatnot, or is it simply too complex? That was the question. Okay, and I thought, awesome. That's exactly it. We're talking Lego here, right? And it's exactly the same thing. Can we play with biological machines, with the system as it would be Lego, and build stuff, or like for people that know Mindstorms, the same thing. And so it's a bioengineering competition or a biological design competition. It is open, so it's basically. It's not like the solar car race where you actually have to build a solar car, right? It is, you're building something, right? And you have to motivate it, and you go through the cycle. And with iGEM, it started as that question, but people early on realized, so it started at that team, and now we're sitting at 300 teams worldwide, okay? So it's a big competition. What the people realized early on is that, yes, we can start building things, we need standards, an interesting question about the standards, but also they started to ask the question, what are the societal impacts of the things that we're doing, right? And there are two ways of looking at that. The one is of what is the business value of this, but also what is the ethics value of this, because we are basically working with living systems, right? And you can work in the systems or you can do without them. And so what the competition has been done is what I guess that's where my background is from, is started bridging the engineering thing with the value and the philosophy and ethics thing. So there's a human practice component to this, where every team has, for instance, to assess how does what I'm doing impact the people around me, right? And that was the very same motivation that I had when I started, studying philosophy, because I wanted to know, I'm developing a technology and I'm giving it away, but what do people do with that, right? So I thought that was a fantastic integration of skills that the students have to learn to move on with the project, right? And so we're doing this as well. So we have done, besides having successes on the bioengineering angle of things, we also had successes on the on that value angle. Okay, so for instance, a couple of years ago, in 2013, we basically developed a molecular zip drive that allowed you to, out of necessity, to zip genetic information into a smaller space, because there's only so much you can put in a cell, right? So, or an MP3 kind of thing. I'm old, a zip drive was cool for me at that point in time. Okay, let's say, or a tar or whatever your favorite compression is. But the funny thing is, we figured out that when we were doing that, most of the DNA work today is done by DNA synthesis companies. So they make that DNA for you on demand, and then you plug it into your chassis and run it. Convenient, right? When I was young, so when I casted the gel, I still had to do this by hand, all right? So problem. But today it's like $20 and you have your gene, okay? The problem though is you also could do something dangerous, right? Like a virus or something like that. So there are security measures in place to check for this, right? But if I'm zipping this, do those security measures catch that, right? So the student figured this out, right? They said, what happens? I mean, we were making this technology, and if somebody wants to get past the screen, can that person use the technology, right? So we engaged with the synthesis companies, we engaged with the Public Health Agency of Canada, with WHO, and with the FBI to see how to do this, right? Is there a problem with that? So it's called the dual use problematic, right? And turns out that in our case, our zip drive was okay. They would find the things, but we submitted like mock sequences to the companies, and in 90% of the cases, they found our sequences and detected it. That was good, right? But the team had got an award from the FBI for that, and the WHO for what was it? A biosecurity commendation for like a forward-thinking problem. But the key thing here is the students figured it out, right? They said, well, that's a challenge, right? And is that proof or not? And so they went out, engaged with the people. So now you have the whole thing. The students not only doing the design of the project, learn the molecular biology, and fail a lot in the lab, because it's a non-graded course that we're doing, right? So they actually have to fundraise most of that themselves. So it takes us about, one summer costs us about $40,000 because you have to do, you have to get the components in, then you have to travel. I mean, if you have a team of 10 people, you have to fly them to Boston, you do the math, right?
Yeah.
So they have to do that. They have to do the budget decisions. Yeah. They have to sell it to people to bring the money in, not like vend it, but in terms of like convince people to fund this, right? Yeah. And it's the whole kind of pipeline that you would do, right? Yeah. And we have done, over the last 10 years, we have done that. We have raised equipment. The lab has its own equipment, okay? Yeah. So in the initial phases, in the early years, people would not share because iGEM breaks stuff, right? Yeah. Because they're the weakest one in the link, so they of course break everything, right? Yeah. Now with like the iGEM shaker, it's a different thing. Now people borrow the iGEM shaker, right? It's good. It's kind of cool, right? Over the generations. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is it's an engineering competition that has so much more to it, right? Yeah. Every year is again different. I mean, it depends on the project. The students come up with their own project. It's not well, it's always difficult when you're in a team situation to decide whose idea was that, right? Yeah. And really is because it's in a flow. But then we decide on a project and pursue it, and it's a year-round thing. And it's probably most work intense in the summer, right? Because in Lethbridge, the students are basically not paid for this, right? And the models in different universities are different, right? But in our case, and that's a deliberate decision, is that the students do this in their spare time because they have to be into this, right? And I think that's part of what we, I think it's part of the motivational aspect for the students to go into that. Yeah. So all of that is mostly done on their spare time and in volunteer work, and so so they own it, right? Yeah. And they're coming back to the hockey analogy. Well, it's the same thing, right? Yeah. When you start hockey, how often do you get paid for that?
Yeah, you don't.
They don't, right? Same thing, right? Yeah. So I think that's good. Yeah. And so they do the project. Some years are more than others, and it depends on the group. It's from my point of view, it's a very interesting thing because the group changes, right? It's an interesting group dynamic that occurs. Yeah.
How large are the teams?
We started the first team when I walked into a group and said, let's do this. They looked crazy. I mean, they had like three. Let's say 3 people? Yeah. 3 people, yeah. So we have the collegiate team, that's about 15 people, and we are now in the lucky situation that a lot of support comes from the department, that we get teaching assistantships to look after that, and we run also a high school team. Yeah. And there used to be a high school competition, and in 2013 we won the world championship in the high school division. Yeah, that's awesome. Go Lethbridge, right? Yeah. With students from all the Lethbridge high schools. Yeah. It's a unique team because we still do this from the different high schools, run them in a university lab. So they are. Well, we did crazy numbers like 20 and 30 before, but it's not sustainable. So typically about 15 people.
Right. Okay. So they don't get paid and they don't get course credit?
No.
So what motivates them?
I cannot speak for what motivates them, right? Yeah. But I think one of the it allows them to play, right? I think there's a lot of play involved in this, right? I think that the team aspect is a strong feature in it. Yeah. And I'm not sure if they're aware of this or not, but it forms a community of practice. Right. Between the different years, and there's a lot of students that they're part of one team, they come being in the next team as, let's say, an advisor or an instructor, and then it passes on through this. Yeah. I think a lot of coolness is involved in this, and I think they realize that's the first time in school where they can design their own project and follow through with this, right? And it's not like precast or So I think that's a very powerful thing. Also, I guess I get to write reference letters, which is also a good thing, right? Yeah. Because I think they know that, or the fact that students come back. I mean, we have a lot of students that go from the high school thing into the collegiate thing, and from the collegiate thing into grad school, and it is a pipeline. They cycle back and then instruct in either of those cases. They become in either instructors or supervisors and whatnot. I think community of practice is probably a good description of that. Yeah. And I think that is a feeling that often, we talked about how math people usually kind of like I feel isolated. So suddenly you're in a group, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And how math not necessarily. Or what in school you not necessarily know what it leads to what you're doing because of the time frame how things goes in classes and that it's chunked into like 45 minutes pieces. Often the continuity of a process gets lost, right? And here. They have a whole project to follow through, and I think project-based learning is the key thing. I think that is fantastic because you get the different aspects, you see how it flows, and you can own it, and you have you can own it, you have ownership on the process, and I think that is what I like. And then there's a lot of word of mouth. You can do this, and I think we need more of that kind of learning engagement, right? And the classroom setting does not really do this. An example is, for instance, engineering schools, like or design schools. Design schools, they don't have classes. Of course, they have classes, right? But they also always have a project that they do, right? And then you run your project and compare it with others. And so why do they do this? So that they have that you finally have an integration of what you're doing or what you have learned and apply it and see how it interfaces, right? So I think. That is a cool feeling to have, right? And but I mean, you have to ask the students. I don't know. I know why I do this because I like to play, and I think that is a fantastic thing to do. And I like to see this. And,
What's your sense of your students in terms of I mean, you're working with high school students on the iGEM. You're working with students, like you say, coming in, and there's this reservation. Are we cultivating this idea of play, this ethic of play, this ethic of discovery? Do you see that, or do you find that it's something that you really have to work to cultivate, that it's not something they're necessarily bringing into your classrooms?
Well, the easy answer is there's not enough play, right? But is that a true answer? It's like the same answer, like the students the students 10 years ago were better than the students right now. They're not. I mean, it's the same thing.
That's right.
And there's a myth. And I don't think that we're having less of play, but we have to. I think fostering it is a good thing. We should not lose it. I think that is in particularly because the tendency, we talked about it when you as a teacher or as an instructor are afraid of going new venues, you're losing that sense of play because you want to be, I mean, for whatever reasons, like maybe time constraints. Because if you're teaching, all you do is delivering courses, there's little of you want to minimize the risk thing, right? And you cannot blame people for doing this, right? So that is the same thing is true for the students. I mean, if they're streamlining their degree and they're expected to do certain things in a certain time frame with a certain grade, then we're framing them into a situation where it's difficult for them to develop that or to maintain it. I'm pretty sure they come in with that. Because I mean, we all do, right? But I think one has to allow for that, because I mean we might end up in a funny situation where we're going to get it out of them the way we are forcing them to be, and then try to reinstill it at the end, right? So that I don't know. And I do agree that if I cannot play, I'm not happy about it. The things that take my play out of me make me unhappy, right? And I loathe them, right? So
it's funny. So much of my teaching practice is based on not replicating what just killed me as a student, right? Sitting in the back of a lecture hall listening there's a place for it, but I just couldn't engage there. So when I build my own practice, it sort of resonates with what you're saying. I have to enjoy it. It has to speak to me. It has to give me energy and that.
As a teacher.
Otherwise, it's not going to affect you're not going to have the effect on that group of kids sitting back there or sitting there with you. If you don't.
But you cannot. I mean, on the other end, if you don't, it should not bring you down. Right? Because I mean, you cannot reach everybody, unfortunately, right? But I mean that.
You've talked on and off kind of throughout this about assessment. Can you describe some of the ways that you do assessment in your courses, in your programs, to help kind of cultivate the things that you're doing? How do you set up your assessment practices?
Well, we do the standard things, right? We do the standards. We have to do content assessment in terms of do the students actually know what the deliverables are? Well, that's typically done in a written form, like in an exam form. I think the most powerful tool is to have participation marks to some degree that then needs to be clearly specified what they have to do. But again, in the discussion that we're having about how to evaluate, you form a card, like, you know, you form boxes around that needs to be ticked, and that is it's a dangerous thing. So I think the best way of doing that is doing the standard assessment, but having the actual learning experience trying to disconnect from the assessment point, right? So for instance, when we were talking, you know, you should not be assessed with how well you hit the black keys, right? So you should be assessed in the end with an assessment about how, like, you know, can you play that, right? So I think that's what we're doing. So for instance, in the class about metabolism and bioengineering, where we did the game development, we talked about it already. I touched on that, you know, that's going to be participation. It allows two different kind of participation styles of the students, right? So it touches different kinds of participation styles that the students might have. And they still have to get their exams ready. And, you know, we do weekly quizzes so that the actual value of each of the is relatively low, but not there, still there. And to help the students to do self-assess where I am. One thing that I think is very important that I do with the students all the time is try to lower the, I don't know if I'm successful with that, but I mean, I'm trying to lower the barrier of I'm not trying to make them fail in their exam, right? I tell them, you know, we're doing these quizzes and I'll make questions and then we talk about those questions. And I'm going to ask you in class, right? We go through the answers and I'll tell them what I thought would be an answer to this question. And ask them to tell me if my question, the way I phrased the question, would not be appropriate to that thing. And so we are learning about how I think about a question. And I think that is super important for the student. And I learned about how they read my question, right? And I think this is super important to separate the assessment of the actual knowledge from the ability to understand my question. Okay, and that is fundamentally important. We spend a lot of time on that. And that also, I mean, ultimately it also helps, you know, forming a connection between the students. But I learned a lot about this, right? And I learned about how I phrased certain things that are misleading for the students, right? So doing that in the beginning allows the students, when we write the first midterm, to be okay with my questions, right? So that is one way of trying to, using still an assessment tool, but making the framework or like how the mechanics of that assessment less scary, right? And so I share practice exams so that you know, they can start practicing what I'm doing, also how I ask the questions. From that, I know that the most difficult questions are the questions where the answer is not in the textbook, and that is an interesting thing. And that's my current, I think my personal challenge now is working on that. So the students are okay that when they give a wrong answer, like it's like in nature, it's not that way, but you base your decision on the following things, you still get marks. Like you might even get full marks for that, right? But they're not used to that. That's an interesting thing. So I have to work on that. That's my next development challenge in that class. Another thing that we're doing for that IST 3200, that is basically the class that we offer in the summer, and that is allows students to get cross credit for participating in iGEM. It's a tier, has 3 layers, and I've started it, but it's now taught by Brian Dempsey. So I can only speak for what I did when I started that. The idea was to give them, because of the transdisciplinarity of iGEM, we wanted to attract people from different disciplines as well, from new media, from management, from math, and but you need to bring them up to speed to what is going on. So we have a very low entrance level. So it's like basic science, and you have to be second year. So that's all there is, right? And so the first couple of weeks would be, what are the molecular biology backgrounds, right? And then you go into the lab and practice that a little bit so that they're all on the same page, basically. And then we do a literature survey, they report, and you can assess that. You can say, you know, what is the name of that restriction enzyme, yay, nay, so it's easy, right? So they get a degree for, and it's not a pass-fail course. The important thing is that they actually get a grade for this, right? So then there's literature assessment, and then they go into the lab. 200 hours in the lab, which is basically crazy, but there's no grade on that. They only have to show up for 200 hours, okay? Which means that now allows them to take whatever they've done before and play with it. So that takes a little bit the pressure of that component, particularly when you're, I mean, not bashing on management students, but if you never have been in a lab, there's a very steep learning curve in this, right? Don't forget that yellow thing on the pipette. So
There's an ethic, I think, especially in the area I work, the K-12 system, that if you don't have rigorous assessment, then there's a fear you don't have rigorous education or you don't have rigorous outcomes in that. But if I hear you talking, there's something about rigor that happens maybe when you pull back and you give people space to play and learn and develop. And what's your experience with that dynamic?
So the first thing is when you say rigorous assessment, what does that mean?
No, for different people it means different things.
That's what I'm saying.
In this province it means diploma exams that are worth X amount, that are often standardized, that are often,
Which is okay, right? I mean, because you have to quantify it. But the point is, how do you get from where you start to that point, right? You do have to do, the question that you're asking is, do we really need to, rigorous assessment on the way there, right? And that's an interesting philosophical question about how you're going to do this. And I mean, it sounds all very good when I talk about the successes that we have in that whole thing, but there are also non-successes there, right? I wouldn't call it necessarily failure, but they're not that successful, right? In a team environment, it's easier to assess because the team dynamics takes care of a lot of these kind of things, right? But for instance, in the class assessment, I mean, if it is outcome oriented, the quality of of the education is then still assessed at the end, right? I think there's some need of following the progress of the learning experience that you're doing, right? In interims assessment, these kind of things. And for instance, in that biochem class that I'm teaching, the weekly quizzes do that for me, right? Because you get a feeling what conceptuality the students have gotten and which ones are not, and then you can start adjusting that. But
sometimes the challenge is that the most important outcomes are the hardest ones to assess. When you talk about questioning or creativity or play, this is much more difficult to assess than content knowledge.
That's correct. Right? That's correct. So so what I was just saying is, what I was assessing basically is the ability to obtain content by using like question asking kind of thing. Yeah, it's an indirect measure. I know, but it's difficult. But it's always difficult, right? And that's why we as teachers often shy away from that, because we have, I mean, you need to know how the class is doing, right? And how do you assess this, right? It's very difficult. I agree. It's a challenge,
Do your students, do you think, do they understand that you're after some of these skills around play and creativity and that? Do they understand that that's an outcome that you're driving toward? Or do many of them think that it's the content knowledge that's really what you value and what's important? Do you get a sense of that?
Yes, often they do.
Right.
Often they do. I mean, one way of looking at that, I mean, is teaching evaluations, right? You get a feel for that, right? Sure. And if you get a lot of written answers, that's a good thing, right? So, I think the consensus is that it's very hard, but the whole kind of trying to understand, or having these softer skills in addressing they're often reflected in that. So I would say but it depends. I have to admit that it depends on my annual performance as well. I have better years than different. Because I'm playing around. I mean, some of the approaches might be better than others, right? And I try to keep the ones that work, but you never know, right? If you add something new, you might fail, right? But I think they get that. I do. Because you also get the cases where they don't get that, and then if that doesn't show up here on occasion. I have one of my favorite teaching evaluations is where one of the students wrote it. Yes, you professors want us to understand what you're teaching, but we don't care. Just give us what we need to know to pass the exam. And I said, all right. Okay. But it's good to know. Right? I mean, that's a positive feedback. It's a good feedback for me to have. And So, in that case, no. But I mean, it depends what the motivation is of the student to go into this class,
Absolutely.
right? And you know, for me to assume that they're all going into that class with the same motivation that I have is a different thing, right? So, which means you have to create a learning environment that's okay for both of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's
the complexity of doing it, isn't it? The complexity of evaluating teaching quality as well.
That's right.
Is there's so many perspectives on what we're trying to achieve in
I
that
really
room.
hate that aspect, you know.
Yeah, I think that gets us to the end. So thank you for taking the time to share your experience and your expertise with us.
Yeah, thank you.
No,
Well, that was fast.
it was good. Yeah, it's fun. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.